Something seriously off is happening inside the American economy, and most people are missing it because they're staring at the wrong scoreboard. On the surface, everything looks fine. The stock market keeps acting confident. GDP prints stay positive. Jobs numbers get framed like a victory lap. But underneath those headline signals, the day-to-day machinery that makes an economy feel livable is wearing down in slow motion, and that's the dangerous part. This isn't the kind of breakdown that shows up with a single dramatic event. No big crash day, no one moment where the lights go out and everyone panics at once. It's more like a structural rot, the kind that spreads quietly while the outside of the building still looks freshly painted. The economy can grow on paper while everyday life gets tighter, more expensive, and less stable. That gap between the numbers and the lived reality is not a small glitch. It's a signal that the system is starting to function differently than people assume. For most of modern history, downturns followed a familiar rhythm. Demand cooled, production slowed, layoffs rose, then eventually policy and time helped things rebound. What's happening now doesn't fit that cycle. This isn't just the economy slowing down, it's the economy becoming worse at converting work into stability, productivity into security, and growth into actual prosperity for regular households. It's not that money has disappeared, it's that money is moving in ways that bypass more and more people. A big part of this comes down to what growth has meant since 2008, and especially since 2020. Instead of expanding primarily through higher output, stronger wages, or broad productivity gains, a huge share of the gains have concentrated in financial assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, derivatives, private equity, and yes, even speculative corners like crypto. The system has been flooded with liquidity through ultra-low rates, emergency lending facilities, quantitative easing, and balance sheet expansion. But that flood didn't spread evenly. It raced upward into asset values much faster than it flowed outward into wages, durable job creation, or productive investment. That's how you get a shiny economy that feels broken. Market caps explode. Home prices surge. Corporate valuations swell like balloons. Meanwhile, wage growth lags, labor participation weakens, and the cost of living outruns incomes for huge numbers of people. You end up with a society where the economy is doing well. Can be true for portfolios and false for paychecks. When assets inflate faster than the real economy, you don't get healthy value creation. You get value extraction. It's like the system discovers it can make money off money more easily than making money off building things. And once that shift takes hold, the economy starts looking strong in markets, while the circulation that supports daily life starts to thin out. Because a real economy runs on flow, households spending without drowning, businesses investing without being crushed, workers building stability instead of constantly patching holes. When that flow weakens, you can still have a booming market while the foundation hollows out. Look at how demand is supported now. Consumer spending increasingly leans on a narrower slice of the population. When the top tier carries a growing share of spending, the whole system gets less resilient. A broad middle class used to be the shock absorber, the stabilizer, the engine. When that engine turns into a stressed, debt-managed survival mode, the economy doesn't just feel worse, it becomes more fragile. And here's the sneaky part. GDP can still rise during that fragility. GDP doesn't measure comfort, security, or affordability. It measures transaction volume. If your rent jumps, GDP benefits. If a hospital bill explodes, GDP benefits. If debt servicing rises because people are trapped in higher interest costs, GDP can still look busy. You can inflate GDP through higher prices without producing more real value. So the country can be told, repeatedly, that the economy is growing while more households quietly feel like they're falling behind. That's not an accident. Over time, the system has shifted from being production-driven to being rent, not just rent, as in housing, but rent as in paying for access. Access to healthcare, access to education, access to software and platforms, access to insurance, access to credit, access to basic stability. More and more major sectors are built to collect payments for permission to participate, instead of creating value in a way that improves living standards. In that world, productivity doesn't decide your quality of life as much as access does. That's why you can see record corporate profits while households feel squeezed. Companies can cut labor, automate service, reduce quality, and still expand margins. They don't need an economy that supports stable careers. They need an economy that supports returns. When financial return becomes the main objective, you don't just get inequality, you get a system that generates instability by design. And that instability shows up clearly in labor. Not as a dramatic spike in unemployment, but as a steady decline in job quality. Full-time, stable employment growth weakens. Gig work, contract work, temporary work, part-time roles, and flexible arrangements expand. Multiple job holding rises, not because people are chasing extra cash for fun, but because one paycheck doesn't cover what it used to cover. The economy stops being about career formation and starts being about income patching. You're not building a life, you're managing risk. Meanwhile, the cost side keeps pressing in. Rent is eating an enormous share of income in many places. Healthcare premiums and out-of-pocket costs climb. Food prices jump. Insurance, utilities, transportation, childcare, and basic services keep rising faster than many wages. That's how you create a society where people are employed but still financially unstable, and where one surprise expense can knock a household off balance. The job market can look okay while the job experience becomes weaker and more exhausting. If you're still with me, this is exactly the kind of stuff I break down on this channel. How the headline economy can look strong while the real-life economy gets harsher. So if you want more clear, no-fluff breakdowns like this, hit subscribe right now. It helps a lot, and it makes sure you don't miss the next one. Now, the clearest example of this shift is housing. Housing used to be primarily shelter, anchored to what local incomes could support. Increasingly, it's treated like an investment vehicle. Institutional ownership has grown in many markets. Corporate landlords, real estate funds, and large investors have more influence over prices and rents than many people realize. And once housing is priced off capital flows instead of wages, the numbers stop matching reality. You can wind up with median home prices that feel completely detached from what the median household earns. People aren't failing a test. They're being priced out by a system that's treating shelter as a portfolio strategy. Healthcare follows a similar pattern. Education, too. Even transportation in some places is drifting in that direction. These aren't just services anymore. They're extraction systems designed to pull revenue from necessities. When the core needs of society become revenue machines, the economy starts to feel internally hostile. You can participate, but you'll be billed from every angle for doing it. That's where financial fragility comes from now. Not from a sudden crash, but from exhaustion. Households aren't borrowing to splurge. They're borrowing to breathe. Credit cards cover groceries. Buy Dash Now, Dash Pay, Dash Later covers basics. Medical bills become long-term debt. Emergencies stop being rare and become routine. Consumer debt climbs and delinquency ticks upward. Not because everyone suddenly got reckless, but because the monthly math doesn't work for millions of people anymore. And yet spending stays up. Why? Because debt is increasingly acting like income. It's replacing the missing room in budgets. That's not a growth model, it's a depletion model. It keeps the engine running by burning the future. The economy continues, but it continues by pulling tomorrow's stability into today's transaction counts. The trap deepens when you look at how businesses are operating inside this environment. Large corporations can keep profits high through financial engineering, pricing power, and cost shifting. Stock buybacks remain massive. Debt issuance and balance sheet tricks can support valuations even when real innovation is weaker. And while big firms can often absorb shocks, small businesses get crushed. Higher interest rates, higher rents, higher insurance costs, higher input prices, and tighter consumer budgets squeeze the small firms that actually anchor communities and employ a huge share of workers. When small businesses close, the damage isn't always loud. It's quiet. It's local. It's the restaurant that disappears, the repair shop that shuts down, the daycare that can't make the numbers work, the small contractor who stops hiring. Those losses don't always show up in the stock market because the stock market doesn't price community health. It prices corporate profitability. So what you get is a widening split between financial performance and economic function. Markets can rise while the foundation erodes. That's not a paradox, it's the point. It's the system doing what it's optimized to do.